when it comes to like talking the specifics, I feel like it comes down to two things. And so it's kind of like holding this desire with an open hand before God. I feel like this is a really great question, but honestly, sis, I don't think I'm the best person to answer this question. Hello everyone, welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Melody and I make faith-based content here on YouTube. I'm posting videos every single Monday and Thursday. So if that is something you're interested in, definitely be sure and subscribe. I would love to have you join the family. So in today's video, we are doing a Q&A, but this is going to be a candid Q&A. So you guys asked so many questions recently all about dating and waiting, celibacy, navigating dating as a Christian woman who is saving herself for marriage. And now while I have navigated those waters, and I did so for like 3 to 4 years, and I did some things right, but I also did some things wrong, I have a lot of experiences to pull from to help you guys navigate this journey. So I'm super excited to dive on into these questions. I asked you guys to submit questions here on YouTube as well as over on Instagram, and you guys did not hold back. So we have some really good ones to dive into. And like I mentioned, this is going to be an extremely candid and honest Q&A. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. I really want to talk to the sis that is trying to genuinely walk this thing out, because when I was in that space, I found it so helpful to watch videos like this because I didn't know anybody in my life at the time trying to do the same thing. So I hope this video can encourage you wherever you are on your walk. Before we hop into it, I want to go ahead and thank the sponsor of today's video, Faithful Counseling. So as you guys know, I personally am such an advocate for therapy, and especially as I was navigating my walk with the Lord and navigating this season of dating and waiting, I was unpacking a lot of beliefs, a lot of experiences, a lot of things that I witnessed growing up, and understanding through therapy how that impacted, one, my view of sex, but two, my view of relationships. And so coupled with this new desire and this new heart to obey God in this area of waiting until marriage to have sex was also so helpful for me on that journey to have a therapist to unpack things with. And so now that I am married, I am still in therapy, and it's something that I probably always will be. Literally, my husband and I had a therapy session this morning. Like, that is how much therapy is a part of our lives and a part of our marriage, and something that we believe in wholeheartedly. The thing that I love about Faithful Counseling is how easy they make it for you to get paired up with a Christian counselor. By answering a few questions, you're able to input where you are in life right now, some of the things that you're working through, some of the things that you want help on, and then within 48 hours, they are going to pair you with a therapist, and from there, you have the ability to pick how you want to communicate with them. So it's not going to be your standard traditional have to drive somewhere and sit down in front of them. You have the ability to message with them. You have the ability to do a video chat or a phone call. So it's really easy to incorporate these therapy sessions into your life and into the things that you already have going on. And another great thing about Faithful Counseling is they do offer financial aid. So I'm gonna have my link in the description box for you to check out, but I cannot recommend therapy, especially Christian therapy, enough. Okay, so with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into your guys' questions. These questions are going to be in no particular order, so let's just start at the top. So the first question is, have you ever felt like, am I really waiting, or am I just destined to be single? Because I've been feeling like that as of late. So yes, sis, I have definitely been there. I navigated singleness, and I feel like singleness with zero prospects on the horizon for about 2 years. And so during this time, I definitely had moments and definitely had thoughts like that. When I did get to that point, I started to try to remind myself that the desire for marriage and the desire for children that I've had as far back as I can remember, to like, I don't know, 2nd or 3rd grade, like I've always wanted to be a mom and I've always wanted to be a wife. I just tried to remind myself that these desires came from God. But then I also, on the flip side, had to remind myself that if these things never come to pass, God is still good, and that there is still something that He's going to do beautifully with my life. And so it's kind of like holding this desire with an open hand before God. So let's go ahead and hop into our next question. It is, as I wait for God to give me my Boaz, I sometimes feel unworthy, and here in Africa, us single mothers are seen as damaged goods. How do I not allow that to discourage me and remain steadfast in believing that my Boaz is still out there? So I feel like when it comes to really believing that what God has for you exists, something that I had to do was have a prayer that I would go to God with and ask him to help me with my unbelief. So in those moments where you feel discouraged, or maybe, you know, society is telling you there's no way, there's no chance, take it to God. Ask him to help you believe in his promises. And then I also think it's important to remember that God doesn't operate by society standards. God doesn't operate by these worldly cultural norms. So while the message that you're hearing day in and day out is that you are damaged goods, that is not the idea that God has about you. God does not subscribe to that standard. And so just reminding yourself of the heavenly truth, I think that also can help you navigate that and hold on to hope. So our next question is all about celibacy and how to communicate that celibacy. So it says, how do you tell your significant other that you want to be celibate? So I feel like there are two different angles we can look at this through. So first, it's that it's like a new relationship and that you guys have never had sex before. And so I feel like in that instance, I would definitely have the conversation before you are each other's significant other, before committing to be boyfriend and girlfriend, before committing to courtship. You should definitely have that conversation of what your expectations are and how you're trying to operate in your relationship, and the things you're trying to participate in and the things that you're not trying to participate in. So I'm thinking back to when my husband and I were dating, and I'm pretty sure we had that conversation like very early on, maybe on our first date. Our situation is a little bit different because we've known each other for quite some time, but we didn't know like the grown-up versions of each other. And so I feel like we had that conversation. It was something that I was always very, very upfront with. I will have our how we met story linked above here. I might dive further into it in that video. I don't really remember. And now the other angle that I feel like I can look at this question through is if you're in a relationship with your significant other and you guys have had sex already, but now you want to be celibate. And so when it comes to this, I feel like it's something that you want to explain as thoroughly as possible and give all of your reasonings, the heart behind it, any insight to them, just to help them understand it if you don't feel like they are going to be potentially on the same page as you. But at the end of the day, I feel like if you are dating someone who also has a relationship with God, God is going to speak to both of you. And so as God is convicting you in this area of wanting to be celibate, if this is the person for you, God also will be convicting them. So you guys are going to be in one accord. So our next question is, do you think a Christian can marry a non-believer and that it would work out? So I feel like kind of like what I've mentioned previously, God can do anything, but do I think it is wise? No. I feel like knowingly marrying someone as a Christian that is not a believer is just opening yourself up to so much struggle. I feel like a Christian marriage already is difficult with two believers who have a relationship with God. It's challenging to merge your lives to become one, but to do it with someone who doesn't have that same foundation or doesn't have that same belief system, it would just be like astronomically difficult. And so this isn't to say that God can't turn a situation around. This isn't to say that God still cannot be in the midst of that, still cannot be using you to maybe bring that other person to Christ. But to knowingly get into that situation, I just wouldn't recommend it. I don't feel like that would be wise. But at the end of the day, we have free will. We can make these choices for ourselves, but not everything is good for us. I'm gonna pop the Bible verse up here that I'm getting that from. So that's just something to consider, and definitely kind of the approach that I would take there. So our next question is, how do you not isolate yourself because you're afraid of choosing wrong again, but also guard your heart at the same time? So when it comes to choosing and then thinking you chose right, but then ended up not choosing right, I have definitely been there. And I found that going to God and really getting a little bit introspective, that was really helpful for me to help me understand why I made the choices that I did, why I saw the situation the way that I did. And as I kind of unpack that, especially bringing that conversation into therapy too, kind of unpacking with my therapist, really trying to understand my decision-making process, it helps me get a better understanding and have a little bit more self-trust in myself to not make that mistake the next time. And so I think the more that you're curious and kind of like get a little bit of curiosity to dive into, you know, why did I make the decisions that I did, instead of condemning yourself, that can lead you to not isolate. And then when it comes to guarding your heart, I feel like you said it perfectly. Like, you kind of have to balance it. You want to make sure that you're doing the thing that God is calling you to do. You're in the places and spaces God is calling you to be in. You're not self-isolating when he's not telling you to isolate. And you also have trust in yourself to hear from the Lord with that next person or in that next relationship and make a better decision, but also being mindful of the things that tripped you up last time and guarding your heart in a way that you're able to use that past experience, learn from it, and do better. So kind of just being a little bit more encouraged, knowing that the Lord is with you. He's not going to let you keep stumbling and stumbling and stumbling. If we go to him and draw close to him, he will draw close to us, give us the insight that we need, and definitely continue guiding us on this journey. So we're going to go ahead and do 3 more questions. So our next question is, I understand that waiting is in terms of sex, but what level of intimacy is the limit? So when it comes to like talking the specifics, I feel like it comes down to 2 things. It comes down to the 2 people that are in the relationship, and then it comes down to knowing that it's not how close you can get to that line, it's how far away you can stay from it. And so I feel like God is going to convict you both individually. 2 people that are in a relationship with God who are pursuing him and who are wanting to maintain celibacy throughout their relationship, the Lord is going to highlight to them the things that they need to do and the things that they need not to do. And so I can speak to the relationship that my husband and I had prior to getting married. We both had different levels of temptation. We both had different things that would tempt us. And so I'm not going to get into like the details of like, oh, you know, we didn't do this, we did do that, blah, blah, blah. I feel like at the end of the day, it is knowing yourself and it is asking God to show you what are my limits. And then when things come up and you're like, oh, I didn't know this was going to be a limit for me, communicating that openly and honest with your partner, with this person you're in a relationship with, and with this person you are traveling down this celibacy journey with. I think open communication is going to be key. Also being open to things changing. I know for myself, the closer that we got to being married, the more like heightened, you know, the desire to be closer was. And so putting new boundaries in place during that time was super important for us and very, very helpful. So our next question is, how do you know if a man is your God-ordained spouse? So I feel like there are a few things that are really important when you are trying to decipher this question. I think first and foremost, it's really important to look at the fruits of someone's walk with the Lord. I feel like that's a really great place to start because sometimes people can say certain things like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. Oh yeah, I go to church. But then you look at their life and you actually don't see any fruit. And so you want to be really mindful of the fruit. And then you also want to make sure that this person has their own personal relationship with God. I feel like it's different having someone that kind of checks off the box of Christian versus having someone that has an intimate relationship with God. Because if 2 people, I feel like I keep mentioning this a bit in this video, I think it's so important. If there are 2 people who are talking to God, God is going to be saying the same thing to these 2 people. And so that is going to create this atmosphere of being on the same page, of knowing that this is truly the place and the space that God wants these 2 people in. So I feel like that's the beauty of, you know, being in a relationship with someone who also hears from God. Because if you are feeling like, I don't think this is it, God is going to be telling that same thing to the other person too. And it also works vice versa. And so if God is telling you, sis, this is the one, you can rest assured in knowing that God is telling that man the same exact thing. So I feel like these are some things to consider when you are asking yourself this question. So our last question for this Q&A is going to be, what can I do to navigate sexual desire while waiting and abstinent? So I feel like this is something that we often don't really get into the nitty-gritty of, but it's something that is very practical that we should talk about. So when we are navigating waiting until marriage, we are humans and the Lord has given us sexual desires. And I think sometimes during the wait, we can try to like turn off that side of our brain, turn off that side of ourselves. But it's something that the Lord has given us. And within the context of marriage, it is something beautiful. And so this is something that I feel like I have been trying to walk through now that I'm on the other side of the wait, because my method of working with my sexual desires while I was also trying to be celibate was to just turn them off completely. But now that I'm in the context of marriage and this is something that it's like, okay, the switch can be flipped, it's been a much more not smooth transition, honestly, than I thought. So to be honest, I feel like this isn't necessarily something that I would recommend you to do like I did. I feel like there has to be a better way to like deal with your humanness, but also kind of putting it in a box until it's time for it to come out. All right, I'm back. I had a little bit of an interruption there, but I wanted to just wrap up this by also making a note that sometimes when we are single and we're navigating our sexual desires, we feel shameful about them. We feel like because we aren't married, or because maybe we participated in sex outside of marriage, that these sexual desires are bad, but they're not. So I think reframing these desires and having the correct godly perspective on them, knowing that ultimately these desires come from the Lord and it's not something to be ashamed of, that's going to be really important. And then navigating them, again, I'm going to have some resources and some books linked down below, but this isn't something I feel like I want to tell you to do what I did here, and so I'm going to point you in the direction of these books. All right, sis, that is going to be it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And I also hope that you're just able to walk away from this specific video and this conversation that we're having feeling a little bit more encouraged and confident to walk down that path of whether you are waiting, whether you are dating, whether you're navigating singleness, just to walk down that path confidently, knowing that God's got you right where He wants you. And let me be the first to tell you that the wait is absolutely worth it. Now, before we wrap it up, of course, it is your turn. So let us know in the comments where you are in your journey. Are you in your single season? Are you in your engaged season? Maybe your married season, maybe somewhere in between. Let us know where you are. I look forward to scrolling through the comments. Definitely encourage you guys to drop one and scroll through as well. As always, I love you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Peace.